And welcome to Straight Up. I am your host, Marc Patrone. Appreciate you tuning in, my friends. Well, Prime Minister Carney has called on Canadians to make sacrifices, but he doesn't seem to be setting much of an example. On the very evening after tabling a budget that added $5,400 in new spending on the backs of every Canadian family, the Liberal government threw itself a party. That's right. Liberals, lobbyists, their friends in the media. Well, you and I were not invited, of course. And it was all courtesy of lobbyists. It featured appetizers and adult beverages at the Metropolitan Brasserie and French restaurant, touted as a taste of Paris. Savor the best Parisian brasseries have to offer. Delish. Based on the pictures, MPs took full advantage of the food and drink. Prime Minister Carney was there, of course, along with select members of the media. No wonder they love the Liberals so much. But you know who seemed to be having the best time of all? None other than the finance minister. That's right. But what do you expect when your last name is Champagne? If these were the best of economic times for Canadians, you could almost forgive the indulgence, but they're not. In fact, 2 million Canadians rely on food banks every month to feed themselves and their families. Throwing a party after you just racked up a $78 billion deficit is beyond tone deaf. It's a middle finger in the face of all those people that the government insists make sacrifices for the good of the country. Here's Prime Minister Carney himself just 2 weeks ago calling on Canadians to tighten their belts.
We won't transform our economy easily or in a few months. It will take some sacrifices.
Right, sacrifices. Well, here's a post by Conservative Member of Parliament Michelle Rempel-Garner. Because nothing screams government fiscal responsibility like a champagne party hosted by lobbyists in the media outlet. During question period, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre ripped the government's spending. Let's listen.
This budget, with its record deficit outside of COVID, is a deficit twice as the size of the one Trudeau left behind, and $16 billion bigger than the Prime Minister promised. It has, in this spending, $5,400 of extra costs for every family in more expensive government. While Canadians are already unable to eat, heat, and house themselves, why is this Prime Minister's costly budget making them pay even more?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this budget has 75% of the measures are for our sovereignty, to protect our borders, to protect our communities, to protect our way of life. And the balance is for affordability, a middle-class tax cut that the member opposite missed because he was not here. Mr. Speaker, this budget invests in Canada at twice the rate as any budget during this millennium. We believe in Canada.
We believe in Canada, says the Prime Minister, suggesting that anyone who does not believe in this particular budget does not believe in Canada? Now, Dan McTeague spent 18 years on Parliament Hill as a Liberal member of Parliament, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't invited to that little shindig yesterday either. Dan, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Mark. And no, definitely when I was in Ottawa yesterday, wasn't invited to any Liberal event anytime. And you know what? I really don't care if I get the invitation or not. Frankly, I would never go.
Now, you were in Ottawa during the 90s. There were some pretty tough times when we were running massive deficits. You were there during the tabling of budgets. Do you ever remember a time when the government, on the government side, had a little party for itself after tabling a budget in which there had to be, tens of millions of dollars in cuts?
And billions of dollars in debt, the likes of which this generation, the next generation will not be able to pay, and with cuts that will obviously perhaps not deep enough, but won't meet the standard of a viable economy in the days to come. And of course, waiting that maybe they're cheering the idea that bad news for us is good news for them. It's a little bit like dancing on the grave of those who've fallen. This seems to be terrible optics. But of course, the woke types out there, the albozos, think this is just normal way of doing things. But maybe they should have celebrated the number of people heading to food banks in this country, or maybe the people who are losing their homes. Maybe perhaps they could even look at the number of young people who can't find work in this country and the very grim economic future that lies ahead for Canada, given 10 years of recklessness. So, not a lot to dance about, but I guess they may be cheering the fact that so many Canadians were ignorant enough to continue these very bad policies, which seem like they're going to continue today. Maybe perhaps they were more importantly celebrating the fact that some people are going to fall for the line that the CPP, which is used for our pensions, can somehow be used as collateral to pay for this massive, obscenely large debt. And I'm not just talking about the federal one, deficit of 78 billion, 1 point near 5 billion for the federal accumulated, equivalent provincial and municipal and personal. I mean, when a country owes 5 or 6 trillion bucks, its economy is only worth half of that. It's called debt to GDP. We're in really difficult times. Hardly a reason for celebrating.
Yeah, and the idea of asking people to sacrifice just 2 weeks ago, especially young people. I mean, he's directed his message towards young people where you have in Ontario, for instance, an unemployment rate of what, 15, 16%. I mean, to ask for sacrifices and then do this, it's kind of a slap in the face, I would say. What do you think?
Oh, it's arrogance and hubris because, we know young people were sacrificed for the interests of the boomers who, by a large majority, voted Liberal and want to preserve what's good for them while the rest of the country falls to pieces. So, yeah, it's their own constituency. It's their own support level or their own support base that I suppose cheers mediocrity. But a decade of recklessness is going to hit far more than just people who didn't happen to support them. It's now going to come to really bite those who actually went along with the idea that elbows up and we don't like Pierre. He talks too mean to us. Someone who's a tough voice, a strong voice in difficult times has been rejected, and they want to celebrate this. I think this goes to show you just how tone deaf the Liberal cult really is when it comes to the very grim destiny that they've created for Canada. And that's why they're not the same Liberals I was once part of that worked very hard, didn't celebrate, was involved with a lot of austerity when it came to a debt situation that was about to cripple the country. We acted decisively, and that helped save not only programs, but a lot of Canadians from the hardship that this generation is going to now experience thanks to its arrogance, its hubris, and its ignorance.
And I bet you want to weigh in, I'm sure, on the floor crossing that we just saw. And of course, rumors there may be others as the Liberals try to get the majority that they need in order to have no problem, passing this budget. Chris D'Entremont, months, 6, 7 months after the election, after he spent weeks, blasting the Liberals over their policies and touting the conservative ones, just flippantly decides he's had enough and goes over to the government side. Does this bother you?
Well, it bothers me because these are difficult times. He's expressed them very well and eloquently in the past. Suddenly, there has to be a personal reason for why he's doing these things, and it can't be because he was supporting, Aaron O'Connor a few years ago. Has a lot to do with the fact that there's probably better opportunities for him, and maybe there's something in the wait for him. Regardless, if this was about his inability to run as Speaker of the House of Commons because the Conservatives needed every single vote, this is a terrible way of pointing out just how disloyal you are. So if he did it to the Conservatives, I'm pretty sure he could probably do it to the Liberals, and will wind up going somewhere else in maybe the next few years if he's given the chance to win the next election. My bets are that he's finished.
Interesting. We have a government, and the Globe and Mail is on side here. It seems to be they're fawning over this budget. They're talking about investment coming in to Canada in the neighborhood of $1 trillion. Based on what exactly? I mean, they haven't tackled the core issues with Canada right now as far as investment goes. That's why so many billions of dollars have left the country for greener pastures in the United States, generally, where they have lower taxes, they have less of a regulatory burden, energy costs are lower. So the idea that by, committing huge amounts of money, and spending, that is somehow is going to be a magnet for investment, it might attract some companies because some companies, let's face it, will say, sure, you've got some money, you're dangling some cash. I'd be happy to relieve you of some of it. But it's not the way to create a long-term economy, is it?
It isn't, and it does suggest that the Globe and Mails and other papers and other those who've indulged themselves very much with financial support to keep themselves going have pushed the Liberal narrative, especially the dangerous one on climate change, and of course on the nonsense surrounding net zero. One by one, these things are falling like dominoes. No electric vehicle. That dream is gone with billions of dollars in public money. The carbon tax is gone. They're going to try to play around and dance around the idea of emissions caps. Look, we've had 10 years of their handiwork, of their wokeness, of their idea that somehow we could wish away the things that make Canada prosperous in favor of nonsense that, frankly, has now lost favor around the world. Look, Greta Thunberg doesn't believe it anymore. Neither does Bill Gates. That should be a sign to the Globe and Mails and other grifters, media grifters, and apologists that it's not time to celebrate something that says, "Hey, we can what they call an investment, which is actual debt accumulation that is likely to lead to even more higher interest rates, supported by our CPP." So I want everyone to understand: you pay for the Canada Pension Plan; it's meant for you when you retire. They want to use this as collateral against the massive debt that they're incurring right now to pay boomers and others who think that this is a wise thing to do. At the end of this, we're going to continue to see the Canadian economy slide. It doesn't take Donald Trump to make a bad situation. This would have still been a dog breakfast with or without tariffs. But as Tiff Macklin has said, the bank governor, get ready, get used to a declining standard of living. You voted for it. And the Globe and Mail helped grease the rails towards that end.
Meantime, the dollar continues to languish. It's down at 71 cents. 5 years ago, it was at 75 cents. And so if you want to keep rates low as well, I mean, that means that our dollar is just going to buy it less and less. And so consumers are going to continue to suffer, Dan. And so, I mean, they're going to look at this budget and say, well, what exactly is there for me besides sacrifice? you know, and frankly, there isn't really all that much. But was there anything else about this budget that stood out for you?
What stood out for me was the falsehood that we could use the Canada Pension Plan, Quebec Pension Plan, CPP, QPP, to offset this debt. Think about it. They're saying we can have all this massive, crushing debt that would have killed us in the 1990s, that we turned things around, but we can absorb these things and pretend that somehow we can fool the bond rating agencies, the credit rating agencies, into believing Canada should maintain its credit worthiness because now they can raid the CPP. The CPP, your pension has now been collateralized. Your pension has now been used as leverage against an ever increasing debt. And guess what? If one bond rating agency declines and reduces Canada's credit rating, well, not only does that become a falsehood, you're going to see higher interest rates, not lower interest rates, and the government will have to borrow money at a much higher rate. So that which it's assuming now will be the projection of debt for the years to come will be even higher. This is the problem we had many years ago, where as interest rates went up, so did the cost of borrowing money, not just for the private sector, consumers and business, but for the government. So we may not have a $78 billion debt. If bond rating agencies change their mind, you better hope they don't. That could be easily another 10, 15 billion bucks. So, we've poached the economy. We've destroyed the energy, the oil and gas sector. We've pretended we've taken, the emission caps off that. We've threatened the automotive sector that isn't given the protection of our big banks and financial institutions and other woke organizations that think that they can virtue signal and stuff. They're not allowed to. They're not being given a challenge to compete by American financial institutions. They're protected, as is supply management. But when it comes to the auto sector here in Ontario, it's under real threat. And I can tell you, with the way things are going right now, we're going to lose our oil sector, our natural gas sector, and we could be losing our automotive sector. All those things combined, we're looking down the abyss, and we're now starting to realize that maybe it wasn't such a bright idea to have people who pretend they know how to deal with the economy, can stand up to Donald Trump, pretend they can do all these things, having been the ones still with the ball peen hammer in their hands after vandalizing the Canadian economy, running the show. I don't want to say Canadians are crazy, but I can tell you a lot of people are probably very shocked, and they're going to forget what I say. Wait till next month when your mortgage rates have to come up for renewal. Wait till you lose your job, or they scale back the amount of hours you have. How are you going to meet the needs of your family? The reality is that these guys have spent the silo bare, and now we're running on fumes.
And they haven't given up on net zero. I mean, we've got a potential here to build infrastructure that would allow us to ship a lot more oil and gas to Asia and to Europe. But of course, we've got the regulatory constraints there and legal constraints in terms of rolling out more pipelines.
Yeah.
And so you have this blind spot as far as the government goes, that even as you've got, people like Bill Gates bailing on the whole idea that, climate change is an existential threat to the planet, these guys are holding fast to that same failed ideology. It's already cost us hundreds of billions of dollars. This is absolute folly, Dan. And I guess these guys are never going to give up on this con, are they?
They're not, and they won't give up until Canadians are crushed into the ground, so that they don't walk around pretending that they've got a guy who lied about what he did in 1998 as far as balancing the budget. He wasn't even in Canada. A guy who said he had something to do with the 2008 economic downturn and preventing us from going to recession. He didn't. That was Jim Flaherty and even Paul Martin's work before. And a guy who said he could handle Trump. Can't do it. Look, if we're going to continue down this idea that net zero has to stay in place, no change on the electric vehicle, what do they call it, availability standard, which is a baloney statement, by the way. They're still continuing with that. There's no tanker ban that's been removed. They're going to continue to, make this impression that they're somehow going to get some kind of energy superstructure or kind of energy corridor. Nothing's happened. They've been there 7, 8 months now, and all we're seeing is falling further and further and further into debt. What will it take? Will you have to lose your home? Lose your ability to make enough money to put food on the table? Will it be a question of your kids fleeing to another country? Is that what's going to finally convince you of your woke ways and having made a dumb decision for the fourth time? I'm not sure what it will take, but my God, and I've said this before, I know we all love the Tragically Hip, and those of us who don't know it, they wrote a great song called 100th Meridian, and one of the quotes in that is very apt to the Canadian electorate today, because I've been knocking on doors since 1978. I can say this. It is now a generation so much dumber than its parents.
Unbelievable. Now, there is some talk that the Liberals, they're too shy of a majority. And do you think that they're a little nervous that they don't have the numbers to pass the budget? The NDP has caved before. There's no reason to think that they won't again, but it just stands to reason that, maybe that's why they're so desperate to attract people to their party and, lure others in order to get the numbers they need. Is it possible that the government might fall in a confidence motion around the budget?
I'm less convinced that'll happen. I think the NDP wants a leadership race, and they might have a few of their members not show up. But I made a statement the other night at a conservative meeting. I don't get invited by Liberals to speak anymore. I wonder why. Gee, I was their consumer guy. I was their consular guy. I was their Veterans Affairs guy. But those aren't things they care about. Even a beautiful week like Remembrance Week, and hopefully we'll celebrate that on the 11th. But I said to the Conservatives, thank your lucky Spurs you didn't form government. I think the best thing the Conservatives do, all the shenanigans and all the tiny little games being played, and tactical games, rather strategic games played by the Liberals, let them play it out. I used to play goalie, not a very good one, by the way, in hockey. It was always let the other guy make the first move, and the Liberals are basically giving themselves enough rope to hang themselves because the economy is falling to pieces. And thank goodness the Conservatives won't have to wear this. This will be completely on Liberal supporters, and those who still fantasize that these people are somehow have their best interests at heart. They don't. It's all about themselves, their grifting friends, and their willingness to try to humiliate or to try to admonish others who don't agree with their ideas, which have nothing to do with the Liberal Party that I belong to far longer than those that are in there now.
Dan McTeague, hard-hitting stuff as always. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me. Enjoy.
And that is it for this edition of Straight Up. Appreciate you tuning in, my friends. Let's do it again soon, shall we? Bye-bye for now.